The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. That's how dark psychology and manipulation works. Its most dangerous power isn't what you see. It's what you never even notice. A word, a glance, a carefully timed silence, and suddenly, you've agreed to something you swore you'd never do. You think you're making choices. But what if I told you many of those choices were never really yours? From the way products are sold, to how leaders win loyalty, to the quiet traps laid in personal relationships, invisible hands are constantly tugging at the strings of your mind. Tonight, we're not just pulling back the curtain. We're tearing it down. I'm going to walk you through 100 of the most unsettling psychological tactics ever documented. The kinds of tricks used by con artists, propagandists, cult leaders, and even corporations that know exactly how to press your buttons. But here's the catch. Once you learn them, you can't unsee them. Everyday life will look different. Ads, conversations, even friendships. You'll start noticing the fingerprints of manipulation everywhere. And you'll realize just how often the devil has been whispering in your ear. So listen closely, because this isn't just knowledge. It's armor. And the more you understand these shadows, the harder it will be for anyone to use them against you. Let's begin. The vulnerability principle. Let me start with perhaps the most important truth in all of psychology. Every person has blind spots. Not character flaws or moral failings, but hardwired psychological vulnerabilities that make us predictably human. Your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information every second, but your conscious mind can only handle about 40 bits. This means 99.999% of what influences you happens below the threshold of awareness. It's in this vast, unconscious territory that manipulation takes root. But here's what most people don't realize. These vulnerabilities aren't constant. They fluctuate based on three key factors: stress, emotional state, and cognitive load. When any of these increase, your psychological defenses weaken dramatically. Consider how car salespeople operate. They don't just sell cars randomly. They've learned to identify vulnerability windows. The end of the month, when they're desperate to meet quotas, creates a fascinating dynamic. Both the salesperson and the customer are under pressure, but the salesperson knows something the customer doesn't. Pressure makes people predictable. A stressed customer walking onto a lot at month's end is operating with compromised decision-making abilities. Their cognitive load is already high from whatever brought them there. Maybe their current car broke down. Maybe they're dealing with work pressure. The salesperson recognizes these signs: fidgeting, checking phone frequently, expressing time constraints, making quick judgments. Watch for these vulnerability signals in yourself when you're tired, emotionally charged, or overwhelmed with decisions. These are precisely the moments when your psychological blind spots become exploitable highways. The reciprocity trap. Robert Cialdini's groundbreaking research revealed that reciprocity, the urge to return favors, is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. But what makes this principle dark is how it can be artificially triggered and exploited. Benjamin Franklin discovered this accidentally in 1736. He wanted to win over a political opponent who disliked him. Instead of doing the man a favor, Franklin asked his opponent to lend him a rare book. The opponent complied, and something fascinating happened. He began to like Franklin more. This counterintuitive result occurs because our minds need to justify our actions. If I helped you, my brain concludes, you must be worth helping. Modern manipulators have weaponized this principle with surgical precision. That free sample at the grocery store isn't just marketing, it's psychological engineering. The moment you accept something, even something tiny and seemingly worthless, your brain begins creating a sense of obligation. The person offering the sample knows that many people will feel compelled to buy something, even if they didn't want the product. This extends far beyond retail. Think about the last time someone did you an unexpected small favor, held a door, bought you coffee, remembered a personal detail. Did you feel a subtle pressure to reciprocate? That's the reciprocity trap in action. The defense lies in distinguishing genuine kindness from manufactured obligation. Ask yourself, is this gift freely given with no expectation, or does it feel like it comes with invisible strings? True generosity never makes you feel indebted. Social proof manufacturing. Humans are social creatures who constantly look to others for cues about how to behave. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch demonstrated this with a simple but disturbing experiment. He showed people two lines, one clearly longer than the other, and asked which was longer. When alone, people answered correctly 99% of the time. But when surrounded by actors who deliberately gave the wrong answer, 75% of people conformed to the obviously incorrect group opinion. This conformity instinct served our ancestors well. Following the crowd usually meant survival. But in today's world, social proof can be manufactured, manipulated, and sold to the highest bidder. Consider online reviews. Your brain processes 5-star ratings as authentic social proof, but increasingly, these signals are artificial. Bot networks can generate thousands of fake reviews. Companies can buy followers, likes, and shares. What appears to be organic social consensus is often carefully constructed theater. The digital age has made social proof manufacturing an industrial process. When you see a restaurant with thousands of positive reviews, a product with millions of likes, or an influencer with huge followings, your ancient brain interprets this as social proof. Surely, all these people can't be wrong. But they might not be people at all. Your defense mechanism here is simple but requires discipline. Look for authentic markers. Real social proof comes from people you know, whose judgment you trust, and whose interests align with yours. Be especially suspicious of social proof that appears too perfect or unanimous. Authority hijacking. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments revealed a troubling truth. Most people will follow authority figures even when asked to do things that contradict their moral judgment. In his studies, 65% of participants administered what they believed were potentially lethal electric shocks simply because a man in a white coat told them to continue. This deference to authority is another survival mechanism gone wrong. In small tribal groups, following the leader usually made sense. But modern society is full of people wearing the costumes of authority without possessing actual expertise or legitimate power. Authority hijacking works through borrowed credibility. A person in medical scrubs gains instant authority in health matters, even if they're not actually a doctor. Someone with an impressive title, expensive suit, or official-looking badge triggers automatic respect and compliance. The advertising industry has perfected this technique. Notice how many commercials feature people in white coats discussing products that have nothing to do with medicine. The doctor recommending toothpaste might be an actor, but your brain processes the visual authority signal before your critical thinking kicks in. Real authority comes from demonstrated expertise, accountability, and alignment of interests. Before following anyone's advice or direction, ask yourself, what actual qualifications do they have? What do they gain from my compliance? Are they accountable for the outcomes they're recommending? Commitment escalation. Once you commit to something, even something small, your mind begins changing to align with that commitment. This psychological phenomenon, rooted in cognitive dissonance theory, explains why people often double down on bad decisions rather than admit error. The foot-in-the-door technique exploits this perfectly. Manipulators start with tiny requests you're almost certain to agree to, then gradually escalate. Each small yes makes the next, slightly larger request feel consistent with who you've already shown yourself to be. Multi-level marketing companies have turned this into a science. They don't start by asking you to buy thousands of dollars of inventory. First, they ask you to attend a meeting, just to learn, no commitment. Then maybe you'll try the product, just for yourself. Then perhaps you'll share it with a few friends. Each step feels reasonable, but you're walking up a psychological escalator that becomes increasingly difficult to exit. The trap lies in sunk cost fallacy and identity consistency. After you've invested time, energy, or money into something, your mind resists admitting it was a mistake. After all, if you're the kind of person who made these choices, they must have been good choices, right? Protection comes from regularly stepping back and asking, if I were encountering this situation fresh today, with no previous investment, would I still choose to participate? Your past decisions don't have to dictate your future ones. Scarcity manipulation. Your brain is wired to pay special attention to anything that's running out. This loss aversion mechanism helped our ancestors survive. When food or resources were scarce, those who acted quickly lived, while those who hesitated starved. Modern manipulators create artificial scarcity to trigger urgent decision-making. Limited time offers, exclusive access, one-day sales, and only 3 left in stock. Messages all exploit your ancient fear of missing out. The diamond industry provides a masterclass in scarcity manipulation. Diamonds are not actually rare. De Beers Company controls the supply, releasing just enough to maintain the illusion of scarcity while keeping millions of diamonds in secure warehouses. Their "A Diamond is Forever" campaign convinced generations that diamonds were both scarce and necessary for true love. Real scarcity usually involves time-sensitive opportunities with genuine constraints. Artificial scarcity involves psychological pressure tactics designed to prevent careful consideration. When someone is pushing you to act now or don't miss out, they're often trying to bypass your rational decision-making process. Take time. Real opportunities don't require immediate decisions. Artificial urgency is almost always a red flag. Emotional contagion. Emotions are the highway to the unconscious mind. Those who understand this highway can navigate it or redirect traffic entirely. Deep within your brain, mirror neurons fire both when you experience an emotion and when you observe someone else experiencing that same emotion. This neurological phenomenon means emotions are literally contagious. They spread from person to person faster than any virus. Researchers have documented how a single person's mood can ripple through an entire office within hours. If the boss arrives angry, that emotional state cascades down through meetings, conversations, and interactions until the whole workplace feels tense. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable brain activity. History is filled with examples of emotional contagion spiraling out of control. The Salem witch trials, mass hysteria events, even financial panics follow the same pattern. One person's fear spreads to another, then another, until rational thinking is completely overwhelmed by collective emotion. Skilled manipulators use this deliberately. In negotiations, they'll arrive in carefully cultivated emotional states: confidence, urgency, excitement, knowing these feelings will transfer to you unconsciously. They're not just presenting information. They're broadcasting emotional frequencies designed to influence your decision-making. Watch for moments when you suddenly feel different after interacting with someone. If you entered a conversation calm and left feeling anxious, excited, or pressured, emotional contagion may have occurred. Love bombing. Love bombing is the strategic deployment of overwhelming positive attention, affection, and validation. It's not genuine love. It's manufactured intimacy designed to create emotional dependency. The neurochemistry is fascinating and terrifying. When you receive intense positive attention, your brain floods with dopamine, oxytocin, and other feel-good chemicals. You literally become addicted to the person providing this emotional high. They're not just making you happy, they're hijacking your reward system. Cult recruiters perfected this technique decades ago. New members are showered with attention, told they're special, unique, chosen. Every insecurity is addressed with praise, every need met with enthusiasm. The target feels more valued and understood than they ever have before. But love bombing always has an expiration date. Once emotional dependency is established, the overwhelming attention gradually withdraws. The target, now addicted to the emotional high, will do increasingly desperate things to get it back. They'll compromise values, ignore red flags, and sacrifice autonomy to return to that initial euphoric state. The crash is intentional. It creates a psychological contrast that makes any return of positive attention feel like salvation. Recovery requires understanding that genuine affection develops gradually, with consistency, not in overwhelming bursts followed by withdrawal. Intermittent reinforcement. Psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered that the most addictive reward pattern isn't constant positive feedback. It's unpredictable positive feedback. This variable ratio schedule creates stronger behavioral conditioning than any other pattern. Casinos built entire industries on this principle. Slot machines don't reward every pull or even predictable pulls. They reward randomly, creating an addiction pattern stronger than cocaine. The gambler never knows when the next one will come, so they keep playing, chasing that unpredictable high. Toxic relationships often follow this exact pattern. The manipulator alternates between wonderful treatment and cold withdrawal, kindness and cruelty, attention and neglect. The target never knows which version they'll encounter, creating an exhausting emotional roller coaster. During the positive phases, they think, "This is the real person, the one who loves me." During negative phases, they endure abuse while hoping to earn their way back to the good times. The unpredictability creates addiction to the relationship itself, regardless of its overall quality. Healthy relationships have consistent patterns of respect and care. If you find yourself constantly wondering which version of someone you'll encounter, or walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their negative moods, you're experiencing intermittent reinforcement manipulation. Gaslighting fundamentals. Gaslighting is reality distortion, the systematic undermining of someone's perception, memory, and judgment. The term comes from a 1944 film where a husband manipulates gas lights and other environmental elements while convincing his wife she's imagining the changes. The process is gradual and insidious. It starts with questioning minor details. "Are you sure that's what happened? That doesn't sound right." Then escalates to broader reality challenges. "You're being too sensitive. You always overreact. You're remembering it wrong." Over time, the target begins doubting their own perceptions. They start second-guessing their memory, their reactions, even their sanity. This self-doubt creates dependency on the gaslighter, who positions themselves as the reliable narrator of reality. Political propaganda often employs gaslighting techniques. Citizens are told their direct experiences aren't real, that economic hardship is actually prosperity, that obvious problems don't exist. The technique works by exhausting people's confidence in their own judgment. Defense requires trusting your initial perceptions and keeping records. When someone consistently tells you that your memories, feelings, or observations are wrong, that's a red flag. Your reality is valid, even when others try to convince you otherwise. Fear-based compliance. Fear hijacks rational thinking faster than any other emotion. When your amygdala detects threat, it floods your system with stress hormones that shut down higher-order thinking and activate survival mode. In this state, you'll accept solutions you would normally reject. Insurance salespeople master this technique. They don't start by explaining policy benefits. They paint vivid pictures of catastrophic scenarios. House fires, medical emergencies, lawsuits, accidents. They activate your fear response, then position their product as the antidote to these manufactured anxieties. The false dilemma is crucial here: buy insurance or face disaster. But reality usually offers many more options than the binary choice fear-based manipulation presents. Most problems have multiple solutions, gradual approaches, and varying levels of risk. When someone is using fear to motivate your decisions, slow down. Ask yourself, is this fear proportional to actual risk? Are there other options beyond the ones being presented? Fear-based decisions made quickly are usually poor decisions. Guilt and shame weaponization. Guilt and shame are powerful social emotions designed to maintain group cohesion. But when artificially triggered, they become tools for behavioral control. The key difference: guilt says you did something bad, while shame says you are something bad. Charity fundraisers often weaponize these emotions. Instead of focusing on positive impact, they emphasize your moral obligation, the suffering you could prevent, the guilt you should feel for having more than others. The emotional manipulation overshadows rational evaluation of the charity's effectiveness or your own financial priorities. Cultural guilt triggers are especially powerful because they tap into deep social conditioning. Good parents do this. Caring people believe that. If you really loved me, you would. Healthy motivation comes from aligned values and genuine desire to help. Manipulative guilt creates resentment, obligation, and behavior that contradicts your authentic priorities. When helping feels more like punishment than choice, guilt weaponization is likely occurring. The savior complex exploitation. Some people have deep psychological needs to feel needed, to rescue others, to be indispensable. Manipulators identify these rescuer types and present themselves as helpless victims requiring salvation. The process involves learned helplessness, convincing the target that they're incapable of solving their own problems while positioning the rescuer as their only hope. The manipulator alternates between crisis and gratitude, keeping the rescuer emotionally invested in their welfare. Codependent relationships thrive on this dynamic. One person creates constant drama and emergencies while the other provides endless support, time, money, and emotional energy. The rescuer feels important and needed. The manipulator receives benefits without reciprocal responsibility. Healthy helping empowers others toward independence. Exploitative helping creates permanent dependency. If your assistance seems to make someone more helpless rather than more capable, you may be enabling manipulation rather than providing genuine support. Confirmation bias amplification. Your brain uses shortcuts to process the overwhelming complexity of daily life. These shortcuts, called cognitive biases, can become backdoors for manipulation. Your brain naturally seeks information that confirms what you already believe while avoiding contradictory evidence. This confirmation bias helped our ancestors make quick survival decisions, but modern manipulators feed this tendency with surgical precision. The process is simple. Identify someone's existing beliefs, then flood them with information that confirms those beliefs while systematically filtering out opposing viewpoints. Social media algorithms have perfected this technique. They analyze every click, share, and pause to determine your political leanings, then create an echo chamber that feels like reality but is actually a carefully curated bubble. Political operatives use confirmation bias amplification to create seemingly grassroots movements. They identify people who already lean towards certain positions, then bombard them with increasingly extreme content that makes those positions feel reasonable, even inevitable. The target never realizes they're being radicalized because each new piece of information feels like natural progression from what they already believed. The most insidious aspect is how good this manipulation feels. Confirmation bias triggers pleasant neurochemical responses. You feel smart, validated, superior to those who don't understand. The addiction to being right becomes stronger than the desire to be accurate. Defense requires intellectual humility and deliberate contradiction seeking. Regularly expose yourself to high-quality arguments against your positions. If you can't articulate the strongest version of opposing viewpoints, you're probably trapped in a confirmation bias bubble. Availability heuristic manipulation. Your brain estimates probability based on how easily you can recall similar events. If plane crashes dominated recent news coverage, flying feels more dangerous even though statistically nothing has changed. This availability heuristic, judging likelihood by memory accessibility, becomes a powerful manipulation tool when someone controls your information diet. Strategic timing amplifies this effect dramatically. Insurance companies advertise heavily after natural disasters. Security companies increase marketing after crime reports. Politicians launch fear-based campaigns after terrorist attacks. They're not responding to increased risk. They're exploiting your altered perception of risk. Media manipulation often involves availability, heuristic exploitation. By repeatedly covering certain types of stories while ignoring others, media outlets can dramatically distort public perception of reality. Shark attacks receive massive coverage despite being statistically insignificant, while common dangers like driving remain underreported relative to their actual risk. Recognition requires stepping back from recent events and seeking broader statistical context. When making important decisions, ask yourself, am I responding to actual probability or just vivid recent memories? The most available information in your mind may not represent the most likely outcomes in reality. Anchoring bias exploitation. The first number you encounter in any situation becomes a psychological anchor that influences all subsequent judgments. Even when that initial number is completely irrelevant, it shapes your perception of what's reasonable, fair, or valuable. Salary negotiations reveal anchoring bias in pure form. Whoever mentions a number first, whether ridiculously high or insultingly low, establishes the psychological framework for the entire discussion. If an employer opens with an extremely low offer, even their generous counteroffers will seem reasonable compared to that anchor, even if they're still below market value. Real estate agents exploit anchoring by controlling which properties you see first. That overpriced house isn't meant to sell. It's meant to anchor your expectations so the next property feels like a bargain. The listing price becomes your reference point, making any discount feel like victory rather than potentially still overpriced. The defense involves independent research before entering any negotiation or major purchase. Establish your own anchor based on market research, comparable situations, or objective value assessments. Don't let someone else's first number hijack your judgment framework. Sunk cost fallacy trapping. Once you've invested time, money, or energy into something, your brain resists abandoning that investment even when continuing is clearly irrational. This sunk cost fallacy keeps people in bad relationships, failing business ventures, and losing casino streaks long after rational analysis would suggest cutting losses. Casinos engineer environments specifically designed to exploit sunk cost psychology. The longer you play, the harder it becomes to walk away because leaving feels like wasting everything you've already lost. But those losses are gone regardless. Continuing doesn't recover them. It just creates opportunity for additional losses. Manipulators use incremental commitment to activate sunk cost psychology. They start with small investments of time or money, then gradually increase stakes. Each escalation feels reasonable compared to what you've already invested, creating a psychological trap where abandoning the situation feels like admitting all previous investments were mistakes. Recognition comes from regularly evaluating situations based on future potential rather than past investment. Ask yourself, if I were encountering this situation fresh today, with no previous commitment, would I choose to get involved? Your past decisions don't have to dictate your future choices. Framing effect mastery. The same information can be presented in ways that dramatically alter your emotional response and decision-making. A medical procedure described as having a 90% survival rate feels much safer than one with a 10% mortality rate, even though the statistics are identical. Framing manipulates the emotional context around factual information without changing the facts themselves. Political operatives are masters of this technique. The same policy can be framed as protecting families or government overreach, as public safety or individual freedom restriction. The underlying facts remain constant, but the emotional response varies dramatically. Marketing departments spend millions on framing research. 25% fat sounds unhealthy, while 75% lean sounds appealing. Lose 10 pounds focuses on deprivation, while gain confidence emphasizes benefits. They're selling the same outcome through different psychological doorways. Defense requires looking beyond presentation to underlying substance. Strip away the emotional language and examine the raw facts. What is actually being offered? What are the real costs and benefits? Effective framing often conceals important details behind appealing presentations. Attribution error exploitation. When good things happen to you, you attribute them to internal factors like skill or intelligence. When bad things happen, you blame external circumstances. But you apply the opposite pattern to others. Their successes are due to luck. Their failures reveal character flaws. This fundamental attribution error becomes a manipulation pathway when someone controls how you interpret events. Corporate crisis management exploits attribution errors systematically. When companies succeed, their messaging emphasizes leadership wisdom and strategic planning. When they fail, external factors, market conditions, regulatory changes, unforeseeable circumstances receive the blame. They're training you to attribute their successes internally and their failures externally. Personal manipulators use this technique in relationships. They take credit for positive outcomes while blaming you or circumstances for negative ones. Over time, this reshapes how you perceive responsibility and competence, often leading to learned helplessness and self-doubt. Recognition involves considering multiple explanations for any outcome. Success usually involves both skill and circumstances. Failure rarely results from single causes. When someone consistently takes credit for good outcomes while deflecting blame for bad ones, attribution error manipulation is likely occurring. Survivorship bias blindness. You only hear stories from those who survived the process, succeeded despite odds, or lived to tell the tale. The failures, casualties, and dropouts remain invisible, creating a distorted picture of reality that overestimates success rates and underestimates risks. Entrepreneurship mythology thrives on survivorship bias. Business magazines profile successful startup founders while ignoring the 90% who failed. This creates an illusion that entrepreneurship is mostly about brilliant ideas and determination rather than also involving tremendous luck and timing. The survivorship stories are real, but they're not representative. Investment advice often suffers from survivorship bias. The financial advisors you hear from are those whose strategies worked, at least recently. Those whose approaches failed are no longer giving advice, managing money, or writing books. This makes dangerous strategies appear safer than they actually are. Defense involves actively seeking information about failures, dropouts, and negative outcomes. Before making major decisions based on success stories, research the failure rate, common pitfalls, and hidden costs. The full picture includes both survivors and casualties. Halo effect leveraging. Picture someone you admire deeply. Perhaps it's a famous actor, a respected professor, or even a well-dressed colleague. Notice how quickly admiration for one trait, maybe their charm, their eloquence, or their appearance, bleeds into assumptions about everything else they do. This is called the halo effect, a powerful cognitive bias where one shining quality casts light across the whole person. Marketers and persuaders have long known how to bend this glow to their advantage. Think of celebrity endorsements. An athlete, skilled in sports but not in medicine, recommends a brand of vitamins. Our brains, unconsciously linking physical strength with health knowledge, transfer credibility where none exists. The halo widens, and suddenly the endorsement feels trustworthy. It isn't limited to advertising. In workplaces, someone articulate in meetings is often assumed to be competent in areas they've never touched. In politics, a confident smile or a persuasive speech can make us assume moral integrity, when in truth the two are unrelated. The halo effect works because our minds crave shortcuts. We dislike the friction of separating traits, so we allow one positive impression to shape the whole picture. Yet awareness can be a shield. When you catch yourself admiring someone, pause and ask, am I judging this person in one domain? Or have I let the glow of their best quality spill into areas it doesn't belong? Recognizing this bias doesn't mean distrusting people. It means noticing when your judgment has been painted with broad strokes. By slowing down and distinguishing domains of competence, you step out of the halo's glow and see people as they are, complex, talented in some areas, but human and fallible in others. Pretext development. Every social interaction follows patterns. Master these patterns, and you can predict and influence human behavior with startling accuracy. Imagine receiving a phone call from someone claiming to be your bank. The voice on the other end sounds confident, professional, even reassuring. They explain that unusual activity has been detected on your account, and they need to confirm a few details. The situation feels urgent, and the caller seems credible. This is a textbook example of pretext development, the art of constructing a believable false identity to open doors that would otherwise remain locked. At its core, pretexting relies on one human weakness. We tend to trust people who present themselves with authority, consistency, and detail. A scammer doesn't simply say, "I'm from your bank." They weave a narrative. They may reference the correct branch, use industry-specific jargon, or mention real policies to bolster their legitimacy. Each detail acts as scaffolding, building a structure of credibility. In digital spaces, pretext development becomes even easier. Fraudsters send emails designed to look like official correspondence, complete with logos, fonts, and carefully worded disclaimers. They know that most people won't inspect the sender's address too closely or question why the email demands immediate action. The defense lies in verification. Whenever an unexpected request comes your way, be it financial, personal, or professional, pause and step back. Call the official number, not the one provided. Check the sender's digital footprint. Pretexts thrive in urgency and familiarity, but crumble when met with deliberate scrutiny. Information elicitation. Now imagine a casual conversation at a cafe. A stranger sits beside you and strikes up small talk. At first, it seems harmless. Busy day? Then gradually, the questions become more personal. Where you work, what projects you're on, who your colleagues are. You may not realize it, but you are being led through progressive disclosure, a tactic where each innocent question lays the groundwork for more valuable information. Information elicitation is often subtle because it mimics natural curiosity. People love to talk about themselves, and manipulators use this instinct as a fishing line. A question about your hobbies can reveal your routines. A question about your company can reveal organizational weaknesses. In social media, the process is accelerated. Every like, every shared post, every tagged photo becomes a breadcrumb, giving manipulators a detailed map of your identity. One well-known intelligence method is the assumed knowledge approach, where the manipulator casually states something they pretend to already know, prompting the target to correct or expand on it. For example, I heard your office just switched to the new accounting software. Must have been a headache. Even if you initially resist, you may find yourself clarifying details, giving away information without realizing. The defense here is not about total silence, but about adopting an information diet. Share deliberately, not instinctively. Online, limit personal disclosures, and remember that casual questions from strangers can serve a hidden agenda. In conversation, ask yourself, would I share this detail with just anyone? If the answer is no, then hold it back. Trust building acceleration. Trust is a slow-growing plant in normal relationships. It develops through time, consistency, and shared experiences. Yet con artists have discovered how to accelerate this process, creating the illusion of trustworthiness in days or even hours. One technique is vulnerability mirroring. A manipulator might share a personal story, often fabricated, that makes them appear open and sincere. This encourages you to reciprocate with your own vulnerabilities, creating a rapid sense of closeness. Another approach is intense rapport building. Eye contact, body language mirroring, and verbal affirmations that make you feel deeply understood. In romantic scams, trust building often takes the form of overwhelming attention. Daily check-ins, affectionate words, constant validation, all designed to lower your defenses. In professional settings, a new colleague might praise your work, seek your advice, or share confidential seeming information, signaling they are already invested in you. The warning sign is ease. Trust, in its authentic form, feels gradual and earned. When it comes too fast, when you suddenly feel closer to someone you barely know, stop and reflect. Is this connection genuine, or is it the product of psychological engineering? Social validation hijacking. Human beings are tribal by nature. We look to others to determine what is safe, valuable, or acceptable. This instinct for social proof is one of the most exploited levers in manipulation. Think of product launches with long waiting lines, or online platforms displaying inflated numbers of followers and reviews. These signals create the illusion of popularity, pressuring individuals to conform. Psychologists call this bandwagoning. The more people appear to be doing something, the harder it is to resist. This tactic is especially potent in digital spaces. Fake reviews, bot accounts, and manufactured hype shape consumer decisions daily. A product that looks popular becomes popular, not because of quality, but because of perception. To defend against social validation hijacking, cultivate the discipline of independent decision-making. Before following the crowd, pause and ask, if I didn't see others doing this, would I still find it valuable? By grounding your decisions in internal standards rather than external pressure, you break free from the pull of the herd. Authority transference. Humans are wired to defer to authority. From early childhood, we are conditioned to trust teachers, doctors, leaders, and experts. But this instinct can be hijacked when someone borrows authority they do not truly possess. This is known as authority transference. A scammer may wear a uniform resembling a delivery worker's, gaining entry into private spaces. A fraudster may pepper their language with academic jargon or attach prestigious titles to their name: doctor, professor, consultant. Even if these credentials are fabricated, people assume legitimacy transfers from the institution to the individual. Advertising often leverages this effect. A product endorsed by someone in a white lab coat carries the sheen of medical authority, even when the actor is not a doctor. The borrowed credibility lowers our defenses. The defense is simple but often overlooked: verify credentials. In a world where image can be manufactured, question appearances. Ask for proof, look up affiliations, and remember that true authority withstands scrutiny. Urgency creation. When pressured by time, our ability to think critically diminishes. Urgency is a manipulator's best friend. High-pressure sales tactics are built on this principle. This deal is only good for today, or only 3 left in stock. Suddenly, you are not weighing value, but battling the fear of missing out. This tactic exploits decision fatigue. Under time pressure, the brain defaults to shortcuts, seeking relief by making a quick choice, often the one the manipulator wants. Casinos use countdowns, online retailers flash limited-time offers, and negotiators push for instant signatures. The antidote is patience. Whenever urgency is manufactured, reclaim your time. If a deal truly cannot wait, it is rarely in your best interest. Take a breath, delay the response, and watch how quickly artificial pressure loses its grip. The door-in-the-face technique. Consider this scenario. Someone asks you for a large, unreasonable favor, say, donating £1,000 to their cause. You refuse, of course. Then they ask for something smaller, perhaps just 20. Suddenly, the second request feels more reasonable, and you are more likely to agree. This is the door-in-the-face technique, a clever form of compromise psychology. The initial extreme request is never intended to succeed. It exists only to make the real request feel modest by comparison. Negotiators use this tactic routinely, starting with inflated demands so their target feels relief when the compromise appears. The danger lies in mistaking manipulation for generosity. Recognition comes from awareness. If the first request feels wildly disproportionate, ask yourself, was it ever intended to be granted, or was it simply setting the stage? Foot-in-the-door progression. Opposite in approach, but equal in power, is the foot-in-the-door technique. Here, compliance is built gradually, beginning with a small, almost trivial request. Agreeing to something minor, signing a petition, sharing a post, volunteering an hour, creates a psychological need for consistency. Once you've said yes, saying no becomes harder. Over time, these small steps escalate into larger commitments. Multi-level marketing schemes thrive on this progression. First attend a meeting, then buy a starter kit, then recruit friends. Each step feels logical because it flows from the last. To guard against this, visualize the destination. When asked for a small favor, consider where compliance might lead. If the final outcome feels uncomfortable, resist the first step. The lowball technique. The lowball technique is among the most deceptive sales strategies. It begins with an attractive offer, a low price, a generous deal, an exciting opportunity. You agree enthusiastically. But once the commitment is secured, the terms change. Hidden fees appear, conditions shift, and suddenly the bargain is far less appealing. Car dealerships are notorious for this. A vehicle is offered at one price, but by the time financing, insurance, and extras are added, the cost has ballooned. Yet many people proceed regardless, unwilling to retract their initial agreement. This is the power of the sunk cost fallacy. Once invested, whether in money, time, or pride, backing out feels harder than accepting the loss. Manipulators count on this hesitation. Recognition is key. When the terms of an agreement change after your commitment, step back. Remind yourself, the decision is not final until all details are clear. A change deal is not the one you agreed to, and you have every right to walk away. Central versus peripheral route processing. When we encounter a persuasive message, our minds take one of two routes, the central route or the peripheral route. This is the essence of dual process theory. The central route engages when we are motivated, attentive, and capable of evaluating logic and evidence. The peripheral route emerges when our attention is low, our motivation is weak, or when surface cues carry more weight than substance. Think of a political campaign. A central route appeal might present data, employment numbers, healthcare statistics, budget forecasts. Here, persuasion depends on the strength of the arguments, their clarity, and the listener's capacity to analyze. But when audiences are tired, distracted, or disengaged, a peripheral appeal is more effective: slogans, imagery, or even the candidate's charisma. Neither route is inherently good or bad. Both are natural modes of processing. The persuasive strategist simply matches the method to the audience. When logic matters, when the stakes are high, when the audience is informed, the central route dominates. But when emotions, distractions, or sheer volume of information overwhelm the mind, the peripheral path proves more influential. Recognizing this division allows you to see why sometimes people are swayed by substance, and at other times, by style alone. The elaboration likelihood model. The elaboration likelihood model, or ELM, expands on this dual route thinking. It emphasizes two key factors: motivation and ability. Motivation refers to how much the listener cares about the subject. Ability refers to whether they have the time, knowledge, or focus to process the arguments. A consumer buying a simple household item, like toothpaste, may lack both motivation and ability for deep processing. They don't want to study fluoride concentrations or manufacturing standards. Instead, they choose based on packaging, endorsements, or brand familiarity, peripheral cues. Contrast this with buying a car. The stakes are higher, the motivation stronger, and ability often greater. Here, people compare safety ratings, fuel efficiency, and long-term costs. Marketers, negotiators, and political leaders tailor their strategies accordingly. If motivation is low, they lean on repetition, imagery, or credibility symbols. If motivation is high, they emphasize evidence, detail, and logical structure. The elegance of ELM lies in its flexibility. It reveals persuasion as a dynamic process, shaped by the context and the state of the audience. Narrative transportation theory. Humans are storytelling creatures. When we become absorbed in a narrative, logic loosens its grip. This is the foundation of narrative transportation theory, the idea that stories transport us into alternative worlds, and while there, our beliefs can subtly shift. A well-crafted story doesn't just entertain, it persuades. Propaganda often hides inside novels, films, or even songs. An audience emotionally invested in a hero may unconsciously absorb the values, ideologies, or biases woven into the tale. Unlike a logical argument, which invites skepticism, a narrative bypasses critical resistance. You don't argue with a story, you live inside it. Entertainment media demonstrates this power vividly. A film portraying a certain political group as villains can shape perceptions without ever stating an argument. A commercial that tells the story of a family gathering around a product is not selling ingredients, it's selling belonging. The defense lies in separation. When immersed in a story, pause afterward to distinguish narrative from reality. Ask, what beliefs did this tale encourage, and do I consciously agree with them? Stories enrich life, but awareness prevents them from rewriting your worldview without consent. Social identity theory exploitation. At the heart of persuasion lies identity. According to social identity theory, people define themselves not just individually, but through group membership, family, nation, religion, fandom, even consumer brands. With identity comes loyalty, and with loyalty comes vulnerability. Marketers know this well. Think of brand communities where buying a product is more than a purchase, it's joining a tribe. A person who drives a particular car or wears a certain logo doesn't just consume, they signal who they are. This in-group identity strengthens bonds, but also creates sharp lines against the outgroup. Political rhetoric frequently exploits this. Leaders frame issues as us versus them, rallying loyalty through division. By tying arguments to identity, persuaders bypass rational debate. To disagree becomes more than rejecting an idea. It feels like betraying one's group. Recognition is key. When you sense that persuasion appeals less to facts and more to who you are, pause. Ask whether the message holds without the identity frame. True conviction should stand apart from tribal loyalty. Reactance theory reversal. Tell someone not to do something, and often their desire to do it intensifies. This is reactance theory, the psychology of forbidden fruit. Restrict freedom, and the mind seeks to reclaim it. Censorship is the classic example. A banned book becomes more alluring, not because of its content, but because of its prohibition. Children long for toys withheld. Adults grow curious about secrets concealed. Even in everyday persuasion, the hint of restriction fuels interest. Savvy persuaders use this in reverse. Reverse psychology thrives on it. You probably wouldn't enjoy this film, can spark curiosity, while don't look into this practically guarantees someone will. Advertisers deploy scarcity, limited edition, available only today, to provoke reactance, turning purchase into rebellion against missing out. The strategy is effective but dangerous, for it manipulates freedom itself. To counter it, notice when your attraction arises from the sense of restriction rather than true value. If the appeal fades without the barrier, the persuasion was never about the object, it was about your instinct to resist control. Cognitive load manipulation. The human brain has limits. When overloaded with information, it shifts into shortcuts, relying less on deep reasoning. This is where cognitive load manipulation enters. By flooding the mind, persuaders exploit exhaustion and decision fatigue. Consider complex contracts. Packed with fine print, legal jargon, and endless clauses, they overwhelm the reader. Under the weight of cognitive load, people often surrender, signing without full understanding. Similarly, high-pressure salespeople talk rapidly, pile on details, and shift topics constantly, knowing confusion breeds compliance. Even digital platforms exploit this. Endless notifications, choices, and micro-decisions slowly drain attention. Once depleted, people accept defaults, skip fine details, or click agree without reading. The defense is clarity. When decisions matter, simplify before acting. Break information into parts, rest, and revisit. Persuasion thrives in confusion. Resistance thrives in simplicity. The paradox of choice. Choice is freedom, but too much freedom paralyzes. The paradox of choice describes how abundance of options can overwhelm decision-making, leading not to satisfaction, but to anxiety and regret. Subscription services exploit this by offering multiple tiers. Consumers, faced with 6 or 7 plans, spend more time comparing than deciding, often defaulting to the middle option simply to escape paralysis. Restaurants with enormous menus, online marketplaces with endless variations, each floods the decision space until relief comes not from the best choice, but from making any choice at all. Persuaders craft environments where abundance steers behavior. By shaping how options are displayed, they nudge decisions, guiding you toward profitable or strategic outcomes. The strategy for individuals is to narrow focus. Define your priorities before facing the options. Recognize when more is not liberating, but distracting. By reframing choice, you reclaim control from the architecture of persuasion. Priming effect utilization. Our minds are never truly neutral. Subtle cues in the environment prepare us to think, feel, or act in certain ways, often without awareness. This is the priming effect. Consider a restaurant menu. When words like succulent, artisan, or farm fresh appear, they prime you to expect quality, influencing not only your choice, but also your perception of taste. Even background music can serve as a prime. French melodies playing softly in a wine shop nudge customers toward French wine. German songs tilt preference the other way. Priming works because the brain thrives on associations. Exposure to one idea activates related concepts, shaping perception and decision without deliberate thought. In politics, for example, emphasizing words like security or freedom before presenting policies prepares the mind to evaluate through those frames. The recognition strategy is subtle awareness. Ask yourself, what environmental cues surrounded this decision? Was my mind prepared before the choice was even presented? By noticing primes, you begin to see how persuasion often begins long before the actual message. The contrast effect. Perception is rarely absolute. It is comparative. This is the contrast effect, where the order or context of presentation alters evaluation. A product costing £200 may seem expensive until it is placed beside another priced at $500. Suddenly, the first feels reasonable. Real estate agents use this tactic, showing a rundown property first so that the target home feels far more appealing. Retailers do the same with clothing. Display the premium line first, and mid-range options appear as bargains. The effect extends beyond products. A person may seem more charismatic after you've met someone awkward, or more competent after you've encountered someone fumbling. Comparison frames perception, often more powerfully than objective traits. To defend, anchor decisions in absolutes. Instead of asking, how does this option compare to what I just saw? Ask, does this hold value on its own? By breaking the chain of comparison, you see reality rather than manipulated perception. The "that's not tall" technique. You've likely seen it in late-night infomercials. This product can be yours for just £20. But wait, that's not all. If you call now, we'll add a second item, absolutely free. This is the "that's not tall" technique, a persuasion method built on the illusion of improving value. The core strategy is timing. By presenting an offer, then immediately sweetening it, the persuader creates momentum. The added bonus feels like a gift, triggering reciprocity and urgency. Even when the total value has not truly changed, the staged reveal makes the deal appear irresistible. Retailers adapt this by offering free samples, bundled discounts, or exclusive extras. The technique works not by changing the product, but by changing perception, transforming a standard deal into what feels like an opportunity. Defense requires slowing down. Evaluate the final package as a whole, not as a series of gifts. If the value is genuine, it will hold without theatrics. Persuasion thrives on pacing. Resistance thrives on pausing. The primacy and recency trap. Though not always labeled separately, many persuasion attempts lean on primacy and recency effects, the tendency to remember first and last impressions more vividly than the middle. A skilled speaker arranges arguments so the strongest points land at the beginning and end, leaving weaker ones buried in between. This strategy shapes memory rather than logic. After a debate, listeners often recall opening statements and closing remarks, forgetting the bulk of middle content. Advertisers do the same by placing their most persuasive imagery at the start and finish of a message. Defense lies in deliberate recall. When evaluating a persuasive appeal, review the entire argument, not just what lingers most vividly. Memory is selective, awareness fills the gaps. Framing. How information is framed changes how it is received. A treatment described as having a 90% survival rate feels reassuring. The same described as a 10% mortality rate feels alarming. The facts are identical, but the frame shifts emotional impact. Politicians frame policies as investments rather than costs. Marketers describe products as limited rather than scarce, and negotiators present compromises as wins rather than losses. The words chosen shape perception before analysis even begins. Defense requires reframing. When faced with persuasive language, restate the information in neutral terms. Replace emotional labels with plain facts. By stripping away framing, you expose the underlying reality. Emotional labeling. Another subtle tool is emotional labeling, the act of assigning feelings to a situation in order to guide interpretation. A negotiator might say, I can see you're frustrated, even if you're not, planting the seed of irritation. Or, you seem excited about this option, nudging you toward enthusiasm. By labeling emotions, persuaders shape the narrative of the interaction. Once a label is spoken, people often conform, adjusting their feelings to match the suggested frame. Defense is simple observation. When someone names your feelings, pause and test them. Is this truly how I feel, or am I being nudged into adopting their frame? Emotional clarity protects against imposed narratives. Trauma bonding creation. Trauma bonding forms when cycles of abuse are mixed with intermittent affection. In such dynamics, moments of cruelty are followed by periods of tenderness, creating confusion and dependency. The victim, trapped between pain and comfort, begins to mistake the temporary relief for genuine love. Psychologists often compare this to Stockholm Syndrome, where captives develop loyalty to captors. In both cases, survival instincts twist into attachment. The brain clings to the moments of kindness, interpreting them as proof of care, even when overshadowed by abuse. In toxic relationships, this pattern repeats endlessly: harm, apology, affection, then harm again. Each cycle deepens the bond, convincing the victim that leaving would mean losing the only source of comfort they know. Breaking this cycle requires recognition. Naming the pattern strips it of its illusion. Healing begins when one sees affection not as love, but as part of the trap. Only then can the cycle be broken. Triangulation tactics. Triangulation introduces a third party into a relationship to create jealousy, rivalry, or insecurity. A manipulator may praise another person excessively, flirt openly, or compare partners unfavorably. The goal is control through competition. In workplaces, this appears as political maneuvering. A manager pits employees against one another, fostering rivalry instead of unity. In families, a parent may favor one child to manipulate the others. The tactic thrives on insecurity. By keeping attention fragmented and trust unstable, the manipulator strengthens their central role. Defense lies in direct communication. Instead of competing for approval, address the manipulation openly. Why am I being compared? Why is this third person being used against me? Refusing to play the game dissolves its power. Isolation techniques. Control grows strongest when support systems weaken. Isolation techniques target friends, family, and communities, gradually cutting ties until the victim depends solely on the manipulator. At first, isolation may appear subtle. Criticism of friends, discouragement of social activities, or guilt for spending time with others. Over time, outside connections erode, leaving the victim without external perspective. In abusive relationships, this isolation ensures that manipulation goes unchallenged. Dependency thrives in silence. When the victim feels alone, leaving seems impossible. Recognition is critical. If someone discourages all outside contact, question their motives. True love and respect do not fear external support, they welcome it. Maintaining independent connections is the surest defense against isolation. Identity erosion. Manipulators often aim not only to control behavior, but to reshape identity itself. Through identity erosion, a person's self-concept is gradually worn away, replaced with one that aligns with the manipulator's desires. Cults demonstrate this vividly. New members are praised, then subtly pressured to abandon old beliefs, hobbies, even names. Over time, individuality dissolves into collective identity. In relationships, a partner may ridicule personal interests, push for conformity, or question self-worth until the victim begins to doubt who they are. This erosion is rarely sudden. It is gradual, disguised as advice, concern, or correction. The defense is self-reflection. Regularly ask, am I still living in alignment with my values, or have I unconsciously adopted someone else's? By checking in with your true self, you prevent gradual shifts from going unnoticed. Financial control. Money is more than currency, it is freedom. Manipulators exploit this by creating economic dependency. Financial abuse often begins subtly, offering to take care of expenses, discouraging independent work, or controlling access to accounts. Over time, the victim loses autonomy, trapped by lack of resources. This control can be devastating. Without financial independence, leaving a toxic relationship feels impossible. Even daily choices, what to buy, where to go, how to live, become dictated by the manipulator. The psychology behind it is simple: restrict resources, and you restrict options. Dependency breeds compliance. Prevention lies in maintaining financial independence. Separate accounts, personal savings, and financial literacy act as safeguards. Autonomy over money preserves autonomy over life. Information control. Beyond money and identity, control often extends to perception of reality itself. Information control works by filtering what the victim sees, hears, or believes. A manipulator may restrict news sources, dismiss outside opinions, or monopolize conversations. Over time, the victim begins to inhabit a narrowed world, defined by the manipulator's narrative. Cults use this through strict media restrictions. Abusive partners may insist on checking phones, controlling internet access, or undermining trust in outside voices. By limiting information, the manipulator becomes the sole authority of truth. The defense is a diverse information diet. Exposing oneself to multiple perspectives prevents any single narrative from dominating. When one source discourages all others, suspicion is warranted. Reality should never be dictated by one voice alone. Emotional blackmail. Few tools are as subtle and powerful as emotional blackmail. It weaponizes guilt, obligation, and love itself. The manipulator frames affection as conditional. If you loved me, you would, or after all I've done for you, how could you say no? This tactic creates a sense of debt, twisting genuine care into compliance. Parents may use it on children, partners on each other, friends on friends. The message is always the same: love must be proven through sacrifice. The psychology here draws on fear of rejection. Humans crave connection, and the threat of losing it can override logic. The victim complies, not because they agree, but because they fear love will vanish if they resist. Recognition begins with one question: is this love, or is it a transaction? True love does not demand obedience in exchange for acceptance. The silent treatment. Silence can speak louder than words when used as punishment. The silent treatment exploits the fear of abandonment by withdrawing communication and affection. Hours, days, even weeks of silence create anxiety in the victim, who feels compelled to make things right to restore peace. This manipulation works because humans are wired to avoid rejection. Social exclusion activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The silent treatment, therefore, is not passive, it is deeply wounding. In relationships, it becomes a tool of control. I'll return to you when you behave as I want. The healthy response is not to chase or beg. Instead, recognize silence as manipulation and refuse to reward it. A relationship built on punishment is not partnership, it is control. Projection and deflection. When responsibility becomes uncomfortable, manipulators often turn to projection and deflection. Projection is attributing one's own flaws to another, a liar accusing others of dishonesty, or a jealous partner claiming the other is unfaithful. Deflection, on the other hand, changes the subject entirely, redirecting blame, minimizing issues, or focusing on unrelated faults. Both tactics prevent accountability. They trap the victim in endless defense, shifting the spotlight away from the manipulator. The defense is to stay anchored in facts. Instead of being lured into defending against false claims, return to the core issue. Ask calmly, we can address that later, but right now, let's focus on the original concern. Facts act as a compass when blame is scattered in every direction. Future faking. Manipulators often sell hope as a leash. Future faking works by making promises of change, commitment, or shared dreams, without any intention of fulfillment. A partner may vow marriage, a colleague may promise promotion, or a friend may commit to help, always in the future. The psychology here is cruelly simple. People endure present dissatisfaction when promised future reward. The manipulator delays accountability by dangling visions that never arrive. Recognition comes by comparing words to actions. If promises consistently fail to materialize, hope has become a trap. Real intentions are shown not in what is said, but in what is done. Hoovering techniques. Even when a relationship ends, manipulation may not. Hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner, describes attempts to suck someone back into a toxic dynamic. It often begins with nostalgia, remember the good times? Or I've changed, things will be different now. This tactic preys on longing and regret. The manipulator reappears with apologies, grand gestures, or sudden vulnerability, hoping to rekindle connection. Yet once the victim returns, the old patterns quickly resume. Defense requires remembering why the relationship ended. Nostalgia is selective, highlighting the highs while forgetting the harm. Keeping a clear record of past pain prevents the cycle from restarting. Boundary erosion. At the core of manipulation lies boundary erosion, the gradual testing and breaking of personal limits. It rarely happens in one bold step. Instead, the manipulator pushes gently, then further, each time normalizing the intrusion. A partner may begin with small requests, escalating to larger demands. A colleague might invade personal space, then later personal time. Over months or years, the victim may hardly notice how far their boundaries have shifted. The psychology behind this is rooted in compliance escalation. Once a small concession is made, it becomes harder to resist larger ones. Over time, the victim may no longer feel entitled to limits at all. The defense is consistent enforcement. Boundaries must be clear, firm, and regularly reaffirmed. Saying no early prevents erosion later. Respect for boundaries is not optional. It is the foundation of mutual respect. Algorithmic manipulation. Behind every swipe, every scroll, and every click lies an algorithm. These invisible systems are designed to predict and shape human behavior. They decide what you see, when you see it, and how long you linger. The core psychology here is simple: reinforcement. Recommendation systems feed you what you've already engaged with, creating a filter bubble. If you click on one video about conspiracy theories, soon your feed is filled with them. If you pause on dramatic headlines, outrage becomes your daily diet. Social media addiction mechanics thrive on this principle. The algorithm doesn't care whether you're informed, only whether you're engaged. The longer you stay, the more ads you see. The defense is not rejection of technology, but conscious training of algorithms. Every like, every skip, every click is feedback. Curating what you engage with is like teaching the system how to treat you. Dopamine hijacking. Apps are not designed to serve you. They are designed to keep you. And to do that, they hijack the very neurotransmitter that motivates human action, dopamine. At the heart of this is the variable reward schedule, the same principle that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. Sometimes you get a notification, sometimes you don't. Sometimes a post goes viral, sometimes it doesn't. The unpredictability makes the brain crave the next check, the next scroll, the next pull of the lever. Notifications, likes, and red badges are carefully engineered to trigger micro-hits of dopamine. This is why silence feels unbearable, why people check their phones dozens of times an hour, even without a prompt. The strategy is mindful use. Disable non-essential notifications. Set specific windows for checking apps. Use technology as a tool, not as an endless slot machine disguised as a service. Social media validation loops. Human beings have always sought validation, but never before has it been quantified so relentlessly. Likes, shares, comments, followers, they create an endless feedback loop where worth feels measurable. This loop preys on external validation dependency. Each notification is a signal of approval, a reassurance that you are seen, valued, accepted. But the absence of those signals can feel like rejection. Over time, self-worth becomes tethered not to who you are, but to how others respond. Influencers often manipulate this dynamic, encouraging followers to like, share, and comment not just for content, but for connection. The audience feels part of something larger, even as their attention fuels someone else's gain. Recognition requires drawing a line between internal worth and external applause. A like is not love. A share is not friendship. True validation comes from within, not from metrics on a screen. FOMO engineering. Fear of missing out, FOMO, is as old as human tribes, but technology has weaponized it into an industry. Social platforms and digital markets amplify the sense that everyone else is living better, faster, richer lives, while you are left behind. The mechanics are deliberate. Stories disappear in 24 hours. Sales end in minutes. Tickets are almost gone. Even updates from friends create the illusion that life is happening without you. This artificial scarcity keeps users engaged. You return not just for pleasure, but to avoid the pain of exclusion. The defense is mindful consumption. Ask, is this truly scarce, or is it manufactured urgency? Real opportunities will wait. Manufactured ones vanish because they were never substantial to begin with. Echo chamber construction. In the digital age, confirmation bias is not just a tendency, it is an engineered reality. Algorithms feed us what we already agree with, reinforcing existing beliefs and creating echo chambers. This process accelerates polarization. Two people in the same society can live in entirely different realities online, each convinced their view is universally correct. Political campaigns exploit this, flooding tailored feeds with content that intensifies division. The danger is not simply misinformation. It is the certainty that comes from never encountering opposition. When every voice around you agrees, doubt feels unnecessary and debate feels hostile. The solution is deliberate diversity of sources. Seek out perspectives you disagree with. Read beyond your feed. The health of democracy and of individual critical thinking depends on escaping the digital echo. Parasocial relationship exploitation. In the past, celebrities felt distant, untouchable. Today, technology collapses that distance. You don't just watch influencers, you feel like you know them. This is the parasocial relationship, a one-sided connection where viewers invest emotionally in someone who doesn't know they exist. Creators exploit this bond, using intimacy to sell products, shape opinions, and secure loyalty. A streamer thanking the community feels personal, even if it's addressed to thousands. A vlogger sharing daily routines feels like a friend, even if it's a brand strategy. The manipulation lies in blurred lines. Fans feel genuine care, while influencers profit from attention. The relationship feels mutual, but it is asymmetrical. Recognition means distinguishing real connection from manufactured intimacy. A friend listens back. A creator may only speak forward. Knowing that difference protects both heart and mind. Data harvesting psychology. Convenience is rarely free. Every app that simplifies your life often takes something in return: your data. This isn't just about names and emails. It's about habits, preferences, moods, even how long your eyes linger on a screen. The psychology behind data harvesting rests on normalization. Permission requests are framed as harmless. Access to contacts to help you connect, location sharing to improve service. Over time, giving away personal information feels natural, even trivial. But each data point builds a psychological profile. What excites you? What scares you? What keeps you awake at night? That profile can be used to shape not just what you buy, but what you believe. The defense is data minimization. Share only what's necessary. Review permissions. Remember, the less you give, the less control others have. Micro-targeting techniques. Once data is gathered, it becomes fuel for micro-targeting, the art of influencing individuals at scale. Unlike mass advertising, micro-targeting tailors messages to personal psychology. Political campaigns mastered this, sending different ads to different demographics. One emphasizing security, another freedom, another prosperity. The same candidate appears as a protector, a liberator, and a provider, depending on who is watching. This manipulation works because people rarely compare what others see. Each person feels the message speaks directly to them, unaware that someone else is being shown the opposite narrative. Awareness is the antidote. Understand that your digital footprint is constantly analyzed. When a message feels perfectly crafted for you, it likely was. Addiction design patterns. Modern apps are not neutral, they are engineered environments, shaped with behavioral psychology in mind. Infinite scroll, autoplay, streaks, and push notifications are not conveniences. They are addiction design patterns. Infinite scroll removes natural stopping points, creating a seamless flow that discourages quitting. Autoplay anticipates your next move, eliminating the moment of choice. Streaks gamify consistency, making you fear breaking the chain. Each feature is designed not to serve you, but to serve engagement metrics. The psychology is identical to casinos: bright colors, unpredictable rewards, endless play. The difference is portability. Your casino now fits in your pocket. The strategy is intentional use. Replace infinite scroll with time limits. Disable autoplay. Treat streaks not as obligations, but as chains designed to bind attention. By reintroducing friction, you reclaim control. Manufacturing consent. When entire populations must be guided, persuasion becomes industrialized. Noam Chomsky described this as manufacturing consent, the systematic shaping of public opinion through media. The idea is not to control people directly, but to structure the flow of information so that the majority accepts decisions already made. War justification campaigns provide clear examples. Governments emphasize selective facts, amplify patriotic sentiment, and drown out dissenting voices. Through repetition and framing, actions that might otherwise provoke outrage are presented as inevitable or even noble. The defense is media literacy, learning to ask not only what is being said, but what is not being said. Who benefits from this message? What perspectives are absent? Awareness transforms passive consumers into active analysts. The Overton window. Every society has boundaries of what can be said publicly, the range of acceptable discourse. The Overton window describes how those boundaries can shift over time. Positions once considered extreme become normalized through repetition and gradual exposure. Political movements exploit this by introducing ideas on the fringes, allowing outrage and debate to make them more familiar. Over time, yesterday's radical suggestion becomes today's mainstream option. This technique works because humans adjust to shifting baselines. What feels shocking today may feel ordinary tomorrow if the change is gradual enough. Recognition begins with historical comparison. Ask, what was unthinkable a decade ago? Tracking these shifts reveals how norms are engineered rather than naturally evolved. Astroturfing operations. Real grassroots movements grow from genuine public demand. Astroturfing, however, is the fabrication of such movements, carefully staged campaigns designed to appear as popular uprisings. Corporations and political actors use astroturfing to simulate consensus. Paid actors hold signs, bots flood social media, PR firms craft citizen letters. The goal is to create the illusion of widespread support, pressuring the undecided to follow. The psychology here is social proof. People assume that if many others believe something, it must be valid. But if those voices are manufactured, the proof is false. Detection requires seeking authentic voices. Who benefits financially? Are participants consistent across time, or do they vanish after the campaign ends? True grassroots movements sustain themselves without corporate funding. Crisis exploitation. Emergencies open doors that normal times keep closed. Naomi Klein called this the shock doctrine, the use of crises to push policies that would otherwise face resistance. After disasters, people are vulnerable, focused on survival, craving safety. Leaders exploit this moment by expanding powers, privatizing resources, or implementing controversial reforms. Once the crisis passes, those measures often remain, normalized under the banner of necessity. This manipulation works because fear narrows attention. In chaos, long-term consequences fade behind immediate relief. Defense lies in historical pattern recognition. Study past crises. What powers were expanded and which never receded? By recognizing repetition, we can resist the permanent reshaping of society through temporary emergencies. Divide and conquer. Unity is power. To weaken opposition, institutions often employ divide and conquer tactics, fragmenting groups before they can challenge authority. Workplace union prevention illustrates this clearly. Employers may pit workers against one another, management offering selective benefits, fostering rivalries, or spreading rumors that weaken trust. Without solidarity, collective bargaining collapses. Psychologically, humans are prone to in-group versus out-group dynamics. By amplifying small differences, manipulators prevent larger alliances from forming. Recognition requires focusing on common interests. When groups realize they share more than they differ, divide and conquer loses its edge. Unity is the antidote to fragmentation. Bread and circuses. The Roman Empire perfected distraction through bread and circuses, providing food and entertainment to pacify the public while political power went unchecked. Modern societies use similar techniques: sports spectacles, celebrity scandals, endless entertainment streams. Distraction is not inherently harmful, but when it dominates attention, it prevents civic engagement. People become spectators of their own society, too absorbed in diversion to notice structural manipulation. The psychology here exploits the brain's preference for pleasure over complexity. Engaging with entertainment feels easier than grappling with systemic injustice. The balance is found in conscious engagement. Entertainment can refresh the mind, but it must not replace awareness. Ask, am I consuming to escape or to recharge? That distinction separates healthy leisure from strategic distraction. The big lie technique. Some manipulations work not through subtlety, but through audacity. The big lie is a propaganda method where a falsehood is repeated so persistently and confidently that it begins to feel like truth. Humans are wired to equate repetition with reliability. When something is heard often enough, skepticism erodes. Historical propaganda campaigns mastered this. Entire populations were convinced of myths that justified wars, persecution, or authoritarian rule, not because the claims were reasonable, but because they were omnipresent. Over time, truth fatigue sets in, and people stop questioning. The defense is cultivating fact-checking habits. Truth requires more effort than lies, but deliberate verification, cross-checking sources, seeking evidence, creates resilience against repetition-based manipulation. Controlled opposition. Sometimes manipulation doesn't silence dissent, it channels it. Controlled opposition is the creation or co-option of groups that appear to challenge authority but ultimately reinforce the system. In politics, this may take the form of two parties presenting fierce debates, yet both remain within boundaries that protect institutional interests. Citizens feel they have a choice, when in reality, the spectrum of options has been carefully narrowed. The psychology here rests on the comfort of false choice. Humans crave agency, and even a limited menu feels empowering. But when opposition is scripted, dissent becomes another tool of control. Recognition requires asking, does this opposition threaten power, or does it reinforce it by existing within safe boundaries? Real resistance often comes from outside the systems that claim to contain it. Normalization campaigns. One of the most effective tools of systemic manipulation is gradual acceptance engineering. When behaviors or policies are introduced incrementally, resistance is minimized. Over time, the abnormal becomes ordinary. The rise of surveillance states offers a clear example. Cameras on every corner, monitoring software in workplaces, data tracking online, each step justified as protection or convenience. Eventually, what once seemed intrusive becomes expected. The psychology behind normalization relies on moral baseline shifting. Humans adapt quickly to new conditions, recalibrating what feels normal. Resistance requires value clarification exercises. Instead of asking, is this acceptable now? Ask, would this have been acceptable before? Holding on to consistent principles prevents slow erosion of freedom. Economic psychology manipulation. Institutions do not only manipulate beliefs, they manipulate desires. Through advertising, credit systems, and planned obsolescence, economies engineer consumer behavior to keep demand endless. Artificial need creation drives this system. A phone is no longer simply a tool. It becomes obsolete by design, replaced annually with only marginal improvements. Clothing cycles shift faster than utility demands. Entire industries thrive on making people feel inadequate without constant consumption. The psychology here is simple, equating material goods with identity and happiness. By framing wants as needs, people are drawn into cycles of spending that benefit corporations while draining individuals. The defense is distinguishing need from want. Ask, does this solve a real problem, or does it create a new one I didn't have before? Awareness of this distinction weakens the grip of artificial scarcity and endless upgrades. Credit theft psychology. In professional environments, recognition is often as valuable as performance itself. Credit theft occurs when one individual appropriates another's work, either subtly or openly, to gain advantage. The psychology is rooted in visibility manipulation. A common tactic is dominating discussions. Someone may repeat an idea shared quietly earlier, but phrase it with confidence, making it appear original. Others strategically position themselves to present collective results as personal achievement, ensuring decision-makers associate success with them. The classic scenario unfolds in meetings. A junior employee suggests a solution. It goes unnoticed, then a senior colleague rephrases it and receives praise. The power imbalance makes reclaiming ownership difficult. The defense is documentation strategies. Keep clear records of contributions, emails, project notes, drafts. Sharing updates directly with multiple stakeholders creates a transparent trail that reduces opportunities for theft. Undermining techniques. Not all manipulation takes the form of stealing success. Some focus on planting doubt. Undermining techniques exploit the psychology of competence perception. Instead of attacking directly, manipulators use subtle sabotage, asking misleading questions in meetings, exaggerating minor mistakes, or suggesting concerns about someone's readiness for responsibility. The key is repetition. One remark may be brushed off, but a series of small slights creates a narrative. Soon colleagues begin to wonder, is this person really capable? This works because perception often outweighs reality in professional hierarchies. If enough seeds of doubt are planted, confidence in the target erodes even without evidence. Recognition comes from noticing patterns. A single critique may be fair, but if it consistently originates from the same person and always in public settings, undermining is likely at play. Kiss up, kick down. Some people thrive in hierarchies not by competence, but by strategy. Kiss up, kick down. This approach involves exaggerated deference to superiors while showing disregard, or even hostility, toward subordinates. The psychology here is about power positioning. By appearing loyal and agreeable to those above, the manipulator secures protection and advancement. Simultaneously, by dominating those below, they reinforce their authority and ensure fewer challenges. An example is a manager who flatters executives in presentations but belittles staff in private. To outsiders, they seem supportive and collaborative. To their team, they are oppressive. The defense is institutional, 360-degree evaluations. Systems that collect feedback from subordinates as well as supervisors reduce the effectiveness of this two-faced strategy. Where such systems don't exist, maintaining informal networks of communication helps reveal the full picture. Information hoarding. Knowledge is currency in professional settings, and manipulators know how to hoard information to control outcomes. By withholding details, they maintain an advantage, ensuring others depend on them for critical insights. This technique often appears in project work. One individual might delay sharing a crucial update, waiting until the moment it maximizes their influence. Others may disguise hoarding as efficiency, insisting information is too technical or not relevant until it becomes leverage. The psychology is straightforward. When others lack knowledge, they cannot act independently. Dependence strengthens the hoarder's position. The counter is information network building. Cultivate multiple channels of communication, formal and informal. The broader the network, the harder it becomes for one individual to bottleneck progress. Blame shifting. When failures occur, responsibility becomes a burden few wish to carry. Blame shifting is the art of redirecting accountability to protect one's own position. Common techniques include scapegoating subordinates, highlighting ambiguous instructions, or exaggerating the contributions of external factors. By controlling the narrative quickly, manipulators ensure blame sticks elsewhere. For example, in a failed project, a leader may claim deadlines were unrealistic due to team underperformance, diverting attention from their own poor planning. The psychology here relies on speed and confidence. The first story told often becomes the dominant one. The defense is clear accountability establishment. Define roles, responsibilities, and deliverables at the outset of projects. Documenting agreements makes shifting blame harder when outcomes are reviewed. Meeting manipulation. Meetings are more than discussions. They are battlegrounds for influence. Meeting manipulation leverages group psychology to steer outcomes. Common tactics include controlling the agenda, speaking first to frame the discussion, or flooding the conversation with excessive detail to exhaust participants. Some deliberately save critical points for the end, when time pressure forces hasty decisions. This works because groups are prone to follow structured narratives. Whoever sets the frame often sets the result. The strategy is meeting preparation. Entering with clear objectives, supporting evidence, and questions ready helps resist being swept into someone else's agenda. Taking notes openly also signals attentiveness, making manipulation attempts more visible. Network poisoning. Reputation in professional settings spreads quickly, and manipulators exploit this by engaging in network poisoning, the deliberate sabotage of relationships and credibility. This tactic leverages reputation psychology, where people often rely on indirect impressions rather than first-hand experience. The method is subtle. Casual remarks that frame someone as unreliable, hints about supposed conflicts, or exaggerated retellings of mistakes. Rarely is it an outright accusation. Instead, it's a steady drip of negativity that erodes trust. For instance, a colleague might warn others to be cautious working with you, claiming you are difficult or slow, planting doubt before collaboration begins. Once seated, this reputation bias shapes interactions, regardless of your actual performance. The defense is relationship diversification. Don't rely on a single mentor, sponsor, or small circle. Build broad, authentic connections across levels and departments. The more direct relationships you cultivate, the harder it becomes for one person's poison narrative to dominate. The Peter Principle exploitation. The Peter Principle states that in hierarchies, individuals are often promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Manipulators exploit this phenomenon by strategically positioning themselves to rise through politics rather than capability. They may volunteer for high-visibility projects without real expertise or cultivate relationships that prioritize perception over performance. In some cases, they intentionally shift blame downward while appearing composed upward, convincing leadership they are ready for advancement. An example is someone who excels at self-promotion, highlighting minor contributions as major wins, while quietly relying on others to carry the real workload. Once promoted, their incompetence becomes evident, but the political scaffolding they built protects them. Recognition of this manipulation requires distinguishing competence from politics. Track measurable outcomes, not just charisma. For individuals, the lesson is clear. Document achievements, emphasize substance over style, and align with leaders who value results. Neuromarketing applications. Neuromarketing begins with a simple but unsettling truth. Your brain reacts to things long before your conscious mind makes sense of them. Modern marketers use brain scans, eye tracking, and biometric sensors to measure where attention lingers, which colors spike arousal, and what patterns trigger curiosity. A simple packaging redesign, for example, can ignite subconscious associations. Red tones may heighten urgency, while soft blues communicate trust and calm. Even subtle textures on a box can influence whether a product feels premium before you've even opened it. Consider a supermarket shelf packed with dozens of cereal boxes. You may think you're choosing based on nutrition or price, but neuromarketing studies show that eye movement tends to lock first on characters whose gaze meets the shopper's. Cartoon mascots are often drawn with downward-facing eyes, making eye contact with children at cart level. It feels innocent, but it's calculated influence. The defense here isn't to try shutting off emotional response. That's impossible. Instead, awareness is the shield. When you feel drawn to a design or presentation, pause and ask, am I reacting to utility, or am I reacting to how it makes me feel? That gap between trigger and choice is where autonomy is reclaimed. Psychological pricing. The number itself is rarely the full story. The psychology of pricing has been refined into a science of perception, not mathematics. Everyone recognizes the $9.99 versus $10 trick, but the influence runs deeper. Our brains treat leftmost digits with disproportionate weight, so $4.99 feels dramatically cheaper than $5, even though the difference is a single cent. Anchoring is another key technique. A product might be introduced at $499, then discounted to $299. You believe you've secured a bargain, but the original higher price was never the intended sale point. It was a psychological anchor, shaping the frame of comparison. Restaurants exploit similar dynamics with menu design. High-end items are sometimes placed near mid-range ones, making the latter feel reasonable. In truth, the expensive dish is rarely expected to sell. Its purpose is to make other prices feel acceptable. To defend against this manipulation, shift focus from sticker shock to total cost of ownership. Instead of asking, is this price lower than expected? Ask, what does this cost me over time, including hidden add-ons, maintenance, or opportunity cost? Pricing tricks thrive on snap impressions. Deliberate arithmetic dissolves their spell. Decoy effect utilization. The decoy effect is one of the most elegant manipulations in consumer psychology. It works by introducing a third option that isn't meant to sell, it's meant to steer. Imagine a movie theater selling popcorn. A small costs $3, a large costs $7, and a medium is $6.50. Few people would pick the medium, but its existence changes perception. The large now looks like an incredible deal, just 50 cents more for far greater quantity. Without the decoy medium, many would have settled for the small. The medium isn't a choice, it's a nudge. The brilliance of the decoy effect lies in how invisible it feels. Consumers believe they're making a rational comparison, but in reality, they're comparing relative values shaped by the architect of the options. Subscription services use this constantly. A basic, premium, and deluxe plan, where the mid-tier is priced uncomfortably close to the top tier. Most buyers, fearing loss of value, jump to the higher option. Recognition is the antidote. When faced with tiered pricing, ask, if one of these options disappeared, would my decision change? If yes, you've spotted a decoy at work. That awareness can reset your decision to actual needs instead of engineered comparisons. Social proof manufacturing. Humans are tribal by nature. When uncertain, we look sideways at what others are doing. Social proof turns that instinct into a marketing engine. 5-star reviews, bestseller labels, most popular badges, these aren't just information. They're psychological triggers designed to shortcut your decision-making. The problem arises when social proof is manufactured. Entire industries now exist to generate fake reviews, pad social media follower counts, and simulate popularity. A restaurant with glowing reviews might be buoyed by a bot army. A product with thousands of 5-star ratings may have been pushed by incentivized reviewers who never used it. Social proof becomes even more insidious when tied to exclusivity. Phrases like join 50,000 satisfied customers or trusted by experts worldwide create an illusion of inevitability. If everyone else believes, then resisting feels like isolation. The defense here is verification. Don't just glance at the stars. Read the distribution of reviews. Are they clustered suspiciously at extremes? Do multiple reviews repeat phrases word for word? Authentic feedback is usually messy, full of nuance and imperfections. Manufactured proof is polished, consistent, and a little too convenient. Independent forums, third-party sources, and cross-checking across platforms can pierce the illusion of fabricated consensus. Urgency and scarcity creation. Few psychological levers are as powerful as urgency. When a clock counts down, or when a website flashes only 2 left in stock, rational analysis often collapses under the weight of time pressure. Scarcity whispers to the survival instinct. If it's rare, it must be valuable. Marketers know this deeply. Limited time offers, one-day sales, or members-only exclusives don't just nudge buyers. They create panic disguised as opportunity. Flash sales embody this technique perfectly. By offering steep discounts that vanish within hours, companies condition shoppers to react immediately, often bypassing questions like, "Do I need this? Or is this the best use of my money?" Once the timer hits 0, the deal evaporates, and the fear of missing out overshadows rational evaluation. Airlines and booking sites exploit urgency by showing pop-ups like, "5 people are viewing this room right now," or "Only 1 seat left at this price." Even when true, the information is framed to amplify anxiety and accelerate decision-making. The defense is deceptively simple. Insert a cooling-off period. Train yourself to pause, even when the offer insists there's no time. In reality, most last-chance deals reappear under a different name. By delaying action, you shift the decision from emotional impulse back to logical control, reclaiming power from the artificial clock. Lost leader psychology. Lost leaders turn the logic of pricing upside down. A company deliberately sells a product at or below cost, not to make money directly, but to create a behavioral funnel. The cheap item is bait. The profit comes from what follows. Take the printer and ink model. Printers are often sold at astonishingly low prices, sometimes barely above manufacturing cost. But replacement ink cartridges, which consumers must buy repeatedly, cost far more relative to production. Over the product's lifespan, the customer spends multiples of the original bargain price. The real business isn't printers, it's ink. Grocery stores use similar tactics. Milk or bread might be priced unusually low to lure shoppers into the store. Once inside, customers rarely leave with only the discounted item. They fill their carts with higher-margin goods, making up the store's losses and more. The awareness defense is recognizing total cost of ownership. Instead of judging a product by its sticker price, calculate what it will cost over time. A razor handle offered cheaply isn't truly affordable if the blades are exorbitantly priced. The upfront savings often blind consumers to the long-term trap. Awareness converts the deal back into what it is, a calculated investment in your future spending. Bundle manipulation. Bundling is marketed as generosity, but it's often a sleight of hand. By combining multiple items into a single package, sellers manipulate perception of value. Consumers are less likely to calculate the worth of each component and more likely to accept the bundle as a good deal. Consider software subscriptions. A company may offer a package with 3 tools for $30 a month, compared to $15 for a single tool. The framing suggests enormous savings, 3 for the price of 2. Yet in practice, most users only need 1 or 2 of the tools. The unused portions justify the higher spend, not in function but in perception. Streaming services deploy bundles aggressively, combining TV, movies, and music into one subscription. Even if a subscriber only uses one service, the package feels like better value than paying separately, despite the consumer paying more overall. The defense is evaluation of individual component value. Break the bundle apart mentally. If each element were sold separately, would you willingly buy all of them? If not, the bundle is shaping perception, not serving need. Often, buying only the component you truly use saves far more than the illusion of packaged savings. Thought-stopping techniques. One of the most powerful methods of psychological control is the systematic prevention of doubt. Cults know that skepticism is contagious, so they develop techniques to stop it before it grows. This practice, often called thought-stopping, conditions members to interrupt critical thinking whenever it threatens group cohesion. The mechanism is deceptively simple. Leaders introduce repetitive behaviors that act like mental circuit breakers. Chanting phrases, singing hymns, reciting affirmations, or repeating scripted mantras, all of these serve the same function. They drown out inner dialogue. Imagine a member beginning to wonder, is this teaching really true? Instead of exploring the thought, they are instructed to immediately chant a phrase like stay pure, stay loyal, or to sing a familiar hymn. Over time, this becomes automatic. Skeptical thoughts no longer lead to analysis. They trigger a conditioned shutdown. The psychology behind this is straightforward. The human brain has limited working memory. Fill it with rhythmic repetition, and there is no room for uncomfortable questioning. In fact, neuroimaging studies show that chanting and mantras reduce activity in regions associated with analytical thought while heightening emotional arousal. In other words, the group's techniques literally rewire the mind toward obedience. The defense lies in cultivating tolerance for discomfort. Independent thought often begins with unease, an itch of doubt, or a nagging question. Instead of rushing to silence it, a healthy practice is to pause, breathe, and let the question fully unfold. Ask, why am I feeling this doubt? What evidence supports or contradicts it? By allowing the thought to live rather than burying it, individuals preserve autonomy and prevent conditioning from hijacking their judgment. Loaded language systems. Language shapes thought, and cults know that if you control vocabulary, you can control imagination. Loaded language systems compress complex realities into simplistic, emotionally charged words. Terms like outsider, fallen, faithful, or traitor become shorthand for entire categories of people and ideas. Once adopted, they function like mental shortcuts, eliminating the need for deeper examination. For example, if a member raises a legitimate question, leaders might dismiss it by labeling it doubt talk. The word itself carries negative weight, making the questioner feel guilty before the content of their thought is even considered. In some groups, words like worldly or unenlightened serve to discredit entire perspectives, no matter their validity. The language doesn't just describe, it judges. This system extends to jargon unique to the group. Organizations often invent specialized terms for ordinary experiences, making outsiders sound ignorant and insiders feel special. Over time, this creates an echo chamber where words are understood only within the group's context, reinforcing separation from the outside world. Members no longer think with their own vocabulary, they think in the language the group has supplied. The recognition strategy is to translate back. Whenever a loaded term arises, ask, what would this mean in ordinary words? If someone says, she's fallen into darkness, reframe it as, she made a different choice. If a leader says, this is doubt talk, reinterpret it as, this is a question. By stripping away the loaded language, you expose the manipulation and restore clarity of thought. Confession psychology. Confession appears benign, even noble. Across cultures, sharing faults or failures has long been a path to growth. But in cult psychology, confession is weaponized. Members are encouraged, sometimes pressured, to reveal their deepest vulnerabilities, personal secrets, and private struggles. What begins as catharsis quickly becomes a system of control. When someone confesses within the group, they experience both shame and dependency. The act of disclosure creates a sense of vulnerability, while the group positions itself as the sole source of forgiveness or acceptance. This dynamic traps individuals. They fear judgment if they withhold, yet they lose autonomy when they reveal. Over time, the very material they shared in trust becomes leverage for obedience. Public confession amplifies the effect. A member standing before peers to admit doubt or wrongdoing is not only humiliated but also bound more tightly to the group through guilt. The collective often responds with staged compassion, reinforcing the idea that only through the community can forgiveness be granted. What looks like support is in fact conditioning. Disclose, obey, and be absolved, or resist and be shamed. The defense lies in boundaries. Genuine confession is voluntary, private, and guided by one's own choice of confidant. It should never be coerced, demanded, or tied to loyalty. A healthy question to ask is, am I sharing this because I want healing or because I feel pressured? If disclosure feels obligatory, especially in a public or hierarchical setting. It is no longer self-expression, it is psychological entrapment. Sleep and nutrition deprivation. The human mind does not function in isolation from the body. When the body is starved of sleep or proper nutrition, decision-making collapses in predictable ways. Cults and high-control groups exploit this link deliberately, using exhaustion and deprivation as tools to weaken resistance. Sleep deprivation is one of the most reliable methods for lowering critical thinking capacity. Military psychologists have long documented that even mild sleep loss diminishes focus, memory, and impulse control. Cult leaders adopt the same playbook, but dress it in spiritual or communal clothing. Members are kept awake through late-night rituals, endless lectures, or dawn prayers. Fatigue breaks down skepticism. A tired brain seeks shortcuts, leaning on group consensus rather than independent judgment. Nutrition deprivation works on the same principle. Restricted diets, prolonged fasting, or inadequate food supplies gradually weaken both body and spirit. Without proper nutrition, blood sugar crashes, leaving members irritable, anxious, and more easily manipulated. Leaders may frame this deprivation as purification, sacrifice, or discipline, but the effect is biological. A weakened person cannot resist authority as effectively as a strong one. Intensive training programs provide a clear example. In many organizations, recruits are put through long hours of physical exertion with minimal food and little sleep. In such states, people report altered perceptions, heightened suggestibility, and even hallucinations. These experiences are then reframed as spiritual breakthroughs, when in fact they are symptoms of physiological collapse. The awareness defense is simple but essential. Always check your physical state before evaluating major claims or making big commitments. Ask, am I tired, hungry, or physically depleted right now? If the answer is yes, postpone the decision. Real consent requires a clear mind, and a clear mind requires a nourished, rested body. Black and white thinking. While exhaustion weakens judgment, black and white thinking distorts it entirely. This technique reduces the complexity of life into rigid dichotomies: right or wrong, good or evil, us or them. For cults, this binary worldview is a gift. It eliminates nuance and replaces it with absolute loyalty. Once members adopt this mindset, every question has a predetermined answer. If you doubt the leader, you're labeled a betrayer. If you leave the group, you're lost, damned, or corrupted. Black and white thinking creates a closed cognitive system where alternative perspectives cannot survive. It feels reassuring, certainty always does, but it suffocates truth. The us versus them mentality is one of the clearest examples. Outsiders are portrayed as dangerous, ignorant, or morally bankrupt, while insiders are framed as enlightened or chosen. This stark division isolates members, making the group their only source of identity and belonging. Over time, the outside world becomes so vilified that leaving feels not just difficult but impossible. The tactic also simplifies complex issues into slogans. Economic problems might be reduced to greed versus generosity. Political struggles become freedom versus tyranny. Such framing removes the need for analysis and makes obedience the easiest path forward. The countermeasure is embracing complexity. Life is rarely binary. It is layered, contradictory, and full of nuance. A practical defense is to practice holding two ideas in tension at once, recognizing both strengths and flaws, acknowledging uncertainty without needing instant resolution. When faced with either slash or language, deliberately ask, what's the middle ground? What perspectives are missing? By resisting the lure of false clarity, individuals reclaim their ability to see the world as it truly is: messy, complicated, but far more authentic. Critical thinking enhancement. Critical thinking is perhaps the most reliable shield against psychological manipulation. Many of the tactics we've explored rely on exploiting mental shortcuts, biases, or unquestioned assumptions. When you slow down and deliberately examine the logic behind a message, you begin to see the cracks in the surface. Logical fallacies, for example, are the bread and butter of persuasion that aims to bypass reason. Ad hominem attacks, where the focus shifts from an argument to the person delivering it. False dichotomies, which try to reduce a complex issue into two rigid choices. Appeals to authority, where a claim is treated as true simply because an expert, or someone dressed as one, has said it. Each of these fallacies is effective because it sounds convincing in the moment, especially if delivered with confidence. But training yourself to recognize them turns a manipulator's weapon into nothing more than smoke. Evidence evaluation is the second half of this shield. In a world saturated with information, the challenge is not scarcity of data, but the ability to weigh it properly. A manipulated narrative will often cherry-pick evidence, omit key context, or substitute anecdotes for robust data. Developing the habit of asking, where did this information come from? What's being left out? Who benefits if I believe this? Builds resistance. Consider something as simple as news consumption. When you encounter a headline, don't just accept it at face value. Cross-check it with other reputable outlets. Look for the original source, and notice if the framing changes depending on who's reporting. Over time, this practice strengthens what psychologists call epistemic vigilance, the ability to monitor the trustworthiness of the information you're consuming. Daily skepticism exercises help maintain this sharpness. They don't require hours of effort. Even something as simple as picking one piece of information a day and tracing it back to its root source can train your brain to pause before accepting surface-level claims. The goal is not to become cynical or distrustful of everything, but to develop a habit of measured curiosity. That curiosity, expressed as careful questioning, is one of the most powerful defenses you have. Emotional regulation mastery. If critical thinking is the sword and shield of the mind, emotional regulation is the armor that prevents you from being pierced in the first place. Most manipulation does not succeed by convincing you logically. It succeeds by catching you in a state of heightened emotion, when the rational mind is quiet and the emotional brain, the amygdala, takes the reins. Anger, fear, excitement, or even overwhelming affection can create openings for influence. Learning to regulate emotional responses reduces this vulnerability. Stress management is central here. When stress builds unchecked, cognitive resources shrink. Decisions are rushed, shortcuts are taken, and manipulators thrive in that space. One effective strategy is to consciously insert pauses. Before responding to a request, a provocation, or an offer that feels urgent, simply take a breath. Even a few seconds can allow the rational mind to reassert itself. This is sometimes called the power of the pause. Mindfulness practices reinforce this. When you train yourself to observe emotions without instantly reacting to them, you reduce the degree to which those emotions dictate your behavior. Consider a moment of frustration. Instead of snapping back, you notice the tension in your chest, acknowledge the heat of anger rising, and allow it to exist without immediate action. This doesn't eliminate emotion, it restores your choice in how to respond. Over time, mindfulness strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for judgment and impulse control, making you less susceptible to emotional hijacking. Another element of emotional regulation is cultivating a baseline of calm. Sleep, nutrition, and physical activity all play indirect but powerful roles here. A tired or malnourished brain is a vulnerable brain. Think of how easily you might accept a pushy salesperson's pitch at the end of a draining day compared to a morning when you feel rested and alert. Emotional stability is not simply about techniques. It's also about caring for the physiological foundation on which those techniques rest. Boundary setting psychology. Boundaries form the next line of defense. Without them, manipulation is inevitable because influence always seeks openings in your personal limits. Boundaries are more than just the ability to say no. They are clear markers of where your comfort ends and where another person's influence begins. People often underestimate how psychological pressure erodes boundaries gradually. It doesn't usually come as a bold demand, but as a series of small tests. Can you do me this little favor? Can you bend this rule just this once? Can you overlook this small detail? Over time, small concessions pile up until you're far beyond your original limits. Recognizing this process allows you to spot it early. Healthy boundary setting involves identifying your core values and using them as non-negotiable anchors. If honesty, for example, is one of your guiding principles, then no relationship or request that requires dishonesty can override that. Values-based decision-making ensures that when pressure mounts, you're not scrambling to decide where the line is, you've already drawn it. Learning to say no is one of the most practical skills in this area. Many people struggle with it because they associate no with rejection, conflict, or guilt. But in psychological defense, no is not an attack, it is self-preservation. The phrasing can be gentle, the tone calm, but the boundary itself firm. I'm not comfortable with that. That doesn't work for me. I'll need to think about it. These phrases maintain dignity while resisting manipulation. Over time, manipulators learn that their usual tactics fail against someone whose boundaries are consistent and clear. Boundaries also involve time and attention, not just actions. Consider digital manipulation, endless notifications, persuasive design, or subtle social pressures online. Setting limits on when and how you engage with technology is just as much a boundary as saying no to a person face-to-face. In both cases, you reclaim authority over your own focus, which is the most valuable resource a manipulator seeks to control. Support network importance. No matter how strong your critical thinking, emotional regulation, or boundaries may be, isolation remains a dangerous weakness. Manipulators thrive when their targets are cut off from outside perspectives. That's why building and maintaining a support network is not just a matter of companionship. It is a form of psychological defense. When you speak to trusted friends, mentors, or family members about situations you're experiencing, you invite fresh perspectives. What feels normal in the moment can seem obviously manipulative to someone outside the immediate context. This outside perspective works like a mirror, reflecting back distortions you may have normalized. For example, someone caught in a controlling relationship might not notice how gradually their independence has been eroded. But a friend, hearing the same story from the outside, can point out patterns that would otherwise remain invisible. Regular check-ins are an effective strategy. They don't need to be dramatic or lengthy. Even casual conversations can serve as protective anchors, reminding you of your values and your baseline of healthy interaction. The very act of staying connected prevents the slow drift into isolation that manipulative systems often require. Research on social psychology consistently shows that people with robust social networks are not only healthier physically, but also more resilient psychologically. Supportive relationships buffer stress, improve emotional regulation, and provide accountability. When someone knows they will later share their decisions with others, they are less likely to fall prey to rash, manipulative influences in the moment. Investing in relationships is therefore an act of self-defense. It means giving time and attention to the people you trust and being there for them in return. A strong network cannot be built overnight. It requires consistent nurturing. Checking in, listening actively, and offering genuine support strengthens bonds that may one day protect you when you're too close to a situation to see it clearly. In this sense, your friendships and family ties act as a kind of distributed defense system, many minds watching out for the well-being of one another. Recovery from manipulation. Even with strong defenses, no one is immune to manipulation. The reality is that most people, at some point in their lives, will find themselves having been influenced in ways they later regret. Recovery from manipulation is not a mark of weakness. It is a process of rebuilding strength. The first step in recovery is recognition. Acknowledging that manipulation has occurred can be painful because it often means confronting feelings of shame, guilt, or embarrassment. But psychology teaches us that these feelings are normal responses to betrayal and coercion. They do not mean you are weak. They mean you are human. Manipulators are skilled precisely because they exploit universal human tendencies, trust, empathy, desire for belonging. Realizing this can replace self-blame with clarity. Healing requires time and often structured support. Therapeutic interventions play a vital role here. A trained counselor or psychologist can help untangle the threads of self-doubt and reestablish a sense of autonomy. Cognitive behavioral techniques, for example, are effective in reprogramming distorted thought patterns left behind by gaslighting or emotional abuse. Talking therapies provide a safe space to process experiences without judgment and to rebuild trust in one's own perceptions. Rebuilding trust, both in others and in yourself, is central to recovery. After manipulation, many people find themselves questioning their instincts. How did I not see it? Why did I fall for this? These questions can create a spiral of self-doubt. The path forward is gradual exposure to new, healthier relationships where trust is earned and respected. With each genuine interaction, confidence slowly returns. Growth after manipulation is not only possible, but common. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as post-traumatic growth. People who have endured psychological exploitation often emerge with sharper insight, stronger boundaries, and deeper empathy for others facing similar struggles. They carry lessons about vigilance and resilience that protect them in the future. A hopeful perspective is essential. Manipulation may leave scars, but those scars can serve as reminders of survival and growth. Every defense strategy we've discussed, critical thinking, emotional regulation, boundary setting, and support networks, can be reinforced and strengthened after experiencing manipulation firsthand. In time, what once felt like a defeat can become a foundation of wisdom.